Let's say China.
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 China. China. China.
There are next door neighbors, and you can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska.
You go over to China.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Trump statement, tweeting out insults to Angela Merkel. What's he doing?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host.
Yes. Hello, and welcome. I am James Andrews, and you are listening to So This Happened, the only news you need if you're not voting for Roy Moore in tomorrow's Alabama Senate race. It is Monday, the 11th of December 2017, and I want to start off today by sending our thoughts to New York City, where an attempted terror attack today at the bus terminal at Port Authority wounded a number of people, including the suspected terrorist who is in custody right now. Details are still emerging on that, and I'm sure we will look into it in the days following. But I also want to spend a little bit of time today talking about Roy Moore and the Alabama Senate race. That's tomorrow, December 12th, and it is going to be a big deal. Mrs. Andrews said to me yesterday, if Roy Moore wins, I have lost my faith entirely in humanity, and she is not alone in that sentiment. The fact that Alabama could potentially be electing a paedophile to the US Senate is staggering. Now, over the last few days, there have been some stories leaked out in certain press areas about some of the allegations made about Roy Moore and how they are in fact fake news. Well, we're going to clear that up right now. It has been reported by some news outlets that the women who accused Roy Moore of touching them have come out and said, no, he didn't actually ever touch me, I made that up. Well, the fact is that none of the women who have accused Roy Moore of sexual misconduct, including two women who said that Moore molested them, have backed off their initial claims. And the story comes from a website called Reagan Was Right, which is, as you would imagine, a right-wing website that pushes out stories, and their story here that the women have backed off on their claims is not true. Now, another story which was being pushed pretty hard by Fox News over the last few days is that one of Roy Moore's accusers forged part of her testimony in the yearbook inscription which he had written to her. Moore's supporters and Fox News were celebrating the misleading news that Beverly Nelson, who is one of his accusers, admitted forging a 1977 yearbook inscription that was considered key evidence against the Alabama Republican. Now, the inscription in the yearbook reads, "To a sweeter, more beautiful girl I could not say, Merry Christmas." It is then followed by the signature Roy Moore, DA, and the notation 12/22/77. Now, if you were to listen to Fox News, you would think that this was all made up. In fact, the only thing that Miss Nelson did was add the date, 12/22/77. Everything that came above it has been certified as officially Roy Moore's writing. So these claims that are coming out right now in some of the more right-leaning press are turning out to be just not true at all. And what they're doing is just boosting Roy Moore's supporters to say, you see, we told you it wasn't true. That's what we said. And if you will indulge me for just 1 second, I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat and get a little bit conspiracy theorist. Fox News today reported that Roy Moore is trailing in the polls by 10 points. Now, a lot of people looked at this and said, fantastic, Fox News, it's got to be even worse than that. Roy Moore's going to lose. Doug Jones is going to be the next senator. This is where I put my conspiracy theory hat on. Now, could it be that Fox News just put out that story and splashed it across their headline page so that Democrats who are going to vote for Doug Jones are looking at that and saying, well, he's going to win by a landslide. I don't need to bother getting up early tomorrow and voting. Fantastic. I'll just stay in bed and let everybody else do it. Now, whether or not that is actually what's happening here, it is still extremely important for every single person in Alabama who is legible to vote, or eligible to vote. You have to be legible, I suppose, but eligible as well to vote, gets out tomorrow and votes, because this one really is massively important. This is an opportunity for people in Alabama to show the rest of the country and the rest of the world that they are not quite as backwards as they are pictured pretty much everywhere. When you say Alabama, people kind of go, they snicker, don't they? Yeah, Alabama, where your cousin's your brother and your sister's your mother, that kind of thing, right? Well, this is an opportunity to show the world that actually Alabama has progressed a little bit from the dark days of the 1950s, 60s, when America was great, apparently. And it's not just these crazy left-leaning liberals that are saying this. There are a number of Fortune 500 companies and very influential people saying that if Alabama, in fact, elects Roy Moore to the Senate, it's going to make it very difficult for them to do business in a state that thinks that way. So this is not only going to be a mark against the moral character of Alabama, but it's also going to be a huge financial mark against them. Because if you have these companies that are now saying, well, if Roy Moore's a senator, we don't want to have anything to fucking do with you. You made your bed, you got to lie in it now. So, people of Alabama, I implore you, get out tomorrow, vote. This is a very important election. I can't stress that enough. Well, I sounded like I can't stress that enough. There we go. My teeth fell out of my head apparently just then. Anyway, that's enough about Alabama. We will find out on Wednesday which way the people went. And my fingers, my toes, and anything else I can cross will be crossed all day tomorrow. And in other news, the US ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, who was one of Trump's favorites, said yesterday that she believes that the women that are accusing Donald Trump of sexual misconduct should indeed be heard. Well, today they went on Megyn Kelly's program this morning and spoke about it. So we are going to listen to what those ladies said about the Commander-in-Chief. And I'm going to play quite a lot of this, and I don't apologise for that, because I think these are stories that need to be heard. So sit back, relax, and listen to what people are accusing the President of the United States of America of.
Unfortunately, given Mr. Trump's notoriety and the fact that he was a partner of my employers, not to mention the owner of the building, I felt there was nothing I could do. Given this hostile work environment, my only solution at the time was to simply avoid additional encounters with him. I do realize that in the grand scheme of things, there are far worse cases of sexual harassment, misconduct, and assault, but make no mistake, there is no acceptable level of such behavior. That some men think they can use their power, position, or notoriety to demean and attack women speaks to their character, not ours, which, believe me, is a tough lesson learned. In my case, I only felt the redemption of knowing it was not my own flaws to blame when I read the account of Temple Taggart, whose story had so mirrored my own that I finally felt absolved of the guilt that I had somehow projected an image that made me an easy target. Instead, this was serial misconduct and perversion on the part of Mr. Trump. Unfortunately, this behavior isn't rare in our society, and people of all backgrounds can be victims. The only reason I'm here today is because this offender is now the president of our country. I can promise you that I would much rather have gained public interest because of something great that I accomplished, rather than something, in this case, quite negative that happened to me. I shared my story last year because it was relevant. Mr. Trump dismissed his words in the Access Hollywood tape as locker room talk, but having been the victim of such actions, I knew better. I decided to let my encounter with him be known along with the various others, yet our stories seem to fall on deaf ears. Recently, the Me Too movement has gained momentum, and women have found strength in one another and the courage to come forward, leading many powerful men to suffer the consequences of their actions. Trump, however, has escaped his path unscathed, but over a dozen women have come forward about his sexual misconduct, and we have video proof of him promoting such behavior. In an objective setting, without question, a person with this record would have entered the graveyard of political aspirations, never to return. Yet here we are with that man as president. I want to believe that as Americans we can put aside our political inclinations and admit that some things in fact do transcend politics, that we will hold Mr. Trump to the same standard as Harvey Weinstein and the other men who were held accountable for their reprehensible behavior. Therefore, I ask that Congress put aside their party affiliations and investigate Mr. Trump's history of sexual misconduct. Thank you.
I'm Jessica Leeds, and I'm the senior member of this group. My story goes way back, and it was an episode on an airplane where I sat next to Trump, and he decided that he was bored and wanted some entertainment. I managed to get away from him and go away, but then 3 years later I ran into him again, and he remembered me. So that really stuck in my memory. Years later, I'm come to realize that he is serious about running for president, and I start telling my story. 30 years had lapsed, at least, but I told everybody. I told my friends, I told my neighbors, I told my book club, I told the ladies at the Y, I told anybody and everybody that I could. You want to know what kind of person Trump is, this man who's running for president? Let me tell you what kind of person this is. So obviously, when the Hollywood tape came out and then the debates happened, I got so angry that I wrote a letter to the editor of New York Times. They responded, not just with publishing a letter. They did a video and they did a story. Never in a million years did I ever think that one day I would open up my door and pick up my newspaper and find my picture on the front page. The story was as simple as what I just explained. It was an encounter on an airplane and a totally inappropriate behavior on his part. So then there was a kind of a media scrum, as I call it, and then the election came and he won. And I was absolutely destroyed. But I figured the United States is a big, strong country. We can survive this person. But during the course of the year, I kept hearing from people who would come up to me on the street, in the subway, at the library, at the grocery store, at the airport one time, in the swimming pool, all people, and everybody had a story. Everybody had some experience of being vulnerable and being attacked. And I thought things had gotten better for women in business, but apparently I was wrong. Then the anniversary came of his election. There was some renewed interest by the media as to, what I thought and all that. And then the Weinstein story hit, and it was like an explosion in a shingle factory. Things were flying all over the place. And it became apparent that in some areas, the accusations of sexual aggression were being taken seriously, and people were being held accountable, except for our president, and he was not being held accountable. In fact, his staff made a big point of calling us all liars. So we're at the position now where in some areas of our society, people are being held accountable for unwanted behavior. But we are not holding our president accountable for what he is and who he is. So I'd like to see this moment. I think the Me Too movement is quite fascinating, and I'm hoping that it creates more movement and that we get a change. But we shall see, and we all have to hope.
Wow. Well, there we go. Unfortunately, we are out of time for the day. So it's nothing left for me to do but say goodbye. And remember, we can continue these conversations on Twitter or Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe and like the podcast. Write a little review for us on iTunes. And again, people, if you're in Alabama, please get out tomorrow and vote. Doug Jones. Check it off. So I hope that sounded like me doing a check. That was me doing a check mark in the air. It probably sounded yeah, it probably sounds awful. Anyway, listen, good night, take care, and we will do this all over again tomorrow. Be excellent.